This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, Sherry Horn Hassan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, coming to you on December 24th, 2020 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. Today, my guest is professional astrologer Michael Bartlett, who I will, of course, be introducing properly in just a few minutes. First, my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to remind everyone they can find my weekly posts and my full new moon missives on my Facebook page at Karmic Evolution for Your Soul on Facebook, or you can sign up there also on the left-hand side, scroll down to join email list for the posts if you'd like to get them by email. And that's my email newsletter called Conversations About Consciousness. And this is where you'll find my last post, which went out on Tuesday of this week on Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. Also, if you've missed any shows, you can go to my website at karmicevolution.com, or if you'd like to listen that way live, just go to the site, karmicevolution.com, look at the upper right-hand banner where it says radio show, click there, scroll down, and you're in. Finally, just a quick reminder that I'm continuing to offer my discounted 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to listeners for only $99. Where'd it go? I usually have my little ad here. Yeah. So if you want to gain greater consciousness about your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, if you'd like to move from chaos to clarity in your relationships, your career, finances, or the area of health, if you want to heal old karmic wounds and co-create your own future happiness and success, in part by learning to understand what these old karmic wounds are and awaken to your true potential and highest destiny in this lifetime, then please, by all means, take advantage of my special discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me at Sherry, that's SHERI, at karmicevolution.com, and we'll get your reading booked. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so let's get on to this week's Astro news you can use. The monthly lunar cycle's waxing this week as we move toward next week's Cancer full moon on December 29th. So right now we're still being asked to water the seeds we planted at the December 14th Sagittarius new moon solar eclipse, which included growing into our capability to look at our higher selves in order to look to our higher selves in order to expand our consciousness around what is true. I'm sorry, I'm a little frazzled today, so hold on. Let me repeat that because it didn't make any sense. And if it doesn't make sense to me, then I know it's not going to make sense to you. So again, the monthly lunar cycle is waxing. And that's because the last lunation we had was on December 14th at the Sagittarius new moon. And the purpose of that Sagittarius new moon was to help us to look to our higher selves in order to expand our consciousness around what is our true inner source of hope, faith, and spirituality. Now, determining what's true for one's soul may be different than looking at quote-unquote truth through the lens of one's ego, which may be swayed by outer society's definitions alone about what is true. So we all have inner truths, and this past Sagittarius new moon asked us not only to go deep about how we might better determine exactly what these inner truths are, but also whether or not they're in sync with what we've been raised to believe is perhaps more empirically true rather than spiritually correct for each one of us. Now, as far as this week goes, December 23rd, yesterday brought us the exact Mars in Aries square to Pluto in Capricorn, usually an aspect of power struggles and potential arguments or confrontations. And I'm going to get political here for a second because, as a lot of you who listen to this show regularly know, I use politics as an as above, so below kind of illustration that we can see how these energies work in the collective and then try to filter them down to how they are reflected into our personal lives. So I had said in my post this week, be careful of not getting into arguments with people, but the thing is that it can also play out again as, feeling pushed up against the wall and overpowered in some way. So in politics, given that President Trump indicated he might not sign the recently passed coronavirus stimulus bill, as this aspect was waxing on December 22nd, and then late on the 23rd, he demanded that the legislation must increase every citizen's payment from $600 apiece to $2,000. This is the coronavirus stimulus where, like last spring, it was decreed through the CARES Act that every eligible citizen would get $1,200, and many of us did. So he kind of threw a wrench into the works by saying, well, I think everyone should get more money. Now, whether or not President Trump has an ulterior motive is not my point. My point is that he gave voice to this energy, which is saying, stop, I'm not going to let you go any further. You need to rethink this, redo this, or I'm going to stand in your way. And that was occurring as Mercury also was waxing into an exact square to Chiron late on December 23rd. So the showdown over what action to take, Mars, about money, Pluto, took center stage. Now, by the time Mercury trines Uranus late on December 24th or early the 25th, depending on one's time zone, new information and perspectives may well have been introduced, allowing for a smoother flow of agreement. And this comes right before the Sun square to Chiron, late December 25th or early 26th. Again, an aspect of tension between responsibility, Capricorn, and compassionate action, Chiron and Aries, as as we move forward. Now, however, we have our mercurial president threatening to hold up the entire government budget, as well as the coronavirus relief. And it remains to be seen whether others will ally with his thoughts on the matter as the Capricorn sun moves into the square to Chiron, or not. So, this sun square Chiron, late on the 25th and early on the 26th, makes for feelings of charity and compassion for the wounds of others, but presents the tension between the haves and the have-nots about how to best rectify what many view as a painful situation. Personally, I think because this coincides roughly with Christmas Day, we may delve more deeply into our own pain and at the same time recognize the pain of others, as this is traditionally a time of giving, especially to those less fortunate than ourselves. Now, the sun trines Uranus, which is, you can see that Mercury did this and now the sun's doing it. So whether we will come up with new insights, perspectives, and different or outside the box solutions to problems remains to be seen. Hang on, let me just double check because I think that, yeah, the Sun trines Uranus, I neglected to say that will happen on December 27th. So again, we have this struggle that is asking or pitting, you know, the Capricorn energy against the Aries woundedness. And then we have the Sun, as we had Mercury trine Uranus, Earth trines, saying, you know, because of that, we may see a more open flow of the tangible material kind, since between now and then we're all likely to better understand the connection between the material world and the well-being of all people, or the pain that I referred to before. I don't think I have to explain what's happened during the coronavirus. I don't think it matters what country you're living in. Everybody is aware. But that this understanding may come through the study of new ideas or concepts that prove revelatory, exciting, and beneficial for all. So it feels like it might bode well for a pretty quick resolution, but, you know, we never know. The Sun, the trine is an easy energy, which also can be likened to being on the pond or in the skating rink and having the wind blow up behind you and you just can't stop yourself. It's going too fast. So something, you know, whatever's set in motion, it may, where it might seem to be stuck, it can all either suddenly get unstuck or suddenly go in a different direction. We never know. Now, December 29th brings the Cancer full moon at 8 degrees and 53 minutes of the Cancer Capricorn polarity at 7:28 p.m. Pacific time and 10:28 p.m. Eastern time in the sign of the mother, nurturing, family, security, emotions, the past, memory, food, and much more. Now, this full moon, which casts the light of the Cancer moon back onto the Capricorn sun, you know, it reflects it back, reminds us to release any attachments to our more patriarchal leanings, which can represent more what we were taught, told, or forced to believe, rather than about how we actually feel. So the Cancer archetype reminds the Capricorn archetype that it's not only about business as usual, especially since Jupiter and Saturn just aligned at the winter solstice on December 21st, as the Sun moved into Capricorn in forward-thinking humanitarian Aquarius. And in addition, I noticed that within 2 weeks, magnanimous Jupiter, which will begin to pull away from Saturn because it's faster moving, will wax toward a sextile, which is always an energy of potential opportunity, with wounded healer Chiron. So since the Cancer moon sextiles Uranus a few hours before this lunation is exact, and following the Sun's trine to Uranus 2 days before, we may well be provided with yet another opportunity to look at situations in a new light, and you know, in ways that can provide more emotional security and satisfaction to us all. Now, the sticking point at this lunation, depending on how one wants to view it, of course, is the fact that Venus aligns with the Sagittarius South Node, while the transiting nodal axis is simultaneously waxing toward an exact square to Neptune and Pisces, which isn't going to perfect the true nodes. It'll square the true nodes will square Neptune exact on January 26, 2021. I think Ronnie Dreyer talked about that last week when we went over the sensitive degree points and the eclipses, the recent eclipses. But you know, there's a lot we can say about that energy. But in the microcosm, Venus square Neptune, while it can be uber charitable, a very devotional and sacrificial energy on one hand, on the other hand can be a heavily deceptive one. And with it, we can tend to see what we want to see, but not necessarily reality. So the square of Venus to Neptune on the Cancer full moon advises us to take off our rose-colored glasses and deal with the reality of situations and peoples and circumstances, not as we want them to be, but as they really are. And, you know, this kind of energy is usually the type where we find that we may have had fantasies, we may have had wishes, we may have had hopes, and not realize that we project these onto other people. Then when the other people don't live up to our expectations or wishful thinking or fantastical dreaming, we tend to feel deceived and because we've been betrayed. But the truth of the matter is, often when you really get right down to it, we are deceiving ourselves. And therefore, when we feel deceived by others, we're always tasked with looking at where we might have had unrealistic expectations to begin with. So the Venus square Neptune coming as, the Cancer moon asks the Capricorn sun to have more compassion and sensitivity and less of a hard-edged, that Capricorn, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, boy attitude, can allow us to have compassion for both ourselves, should we have engaged in some type of delusional thinking for a while, or for others who we know have done so. Now, I think it's going to be a slow wake-up call between now and this Cancer, between this now, this time period with the Cancer full moon next week and January 26th when the nodes square Neptune exact. And, again, we can't have failed to see it, know that there's anyone who's not paying attention or could escape paying attention in some way, shape, or form about the cries of election fraud, And so the question is, between the Venus square Neptune now and the nodes squaring Neptune exact in late January, it's time for the collective to come to terms with where there's been confusion, illusion, and delusion, and to become more clear about that. We talked a little last week, I think, about anger that can result from this too, but but that's a different story. So to deny that there has been such confusion, illusion, and delusion would be the height of Venus square Neptune's refusal to acknowledge that all that glitters is not necessarily gold. Now, meanwhile, Mercury in Capricorn is also moving toward a sextile to Neptune at this lunation, which perfects on January 1st. And this energy can allow increased intuitive capabilities that guide us to better understand the motivations of others now. Such insights may change our former perceptions and allow in new ways of seeing and or understanding the world, which bodes well for any disappointment or upset resulting from having those rose-colored glasses rudely ripped off our noses, should that be the case. Now, I'm going to leave you with two quotes from two different political pundits that I jotted down earlier this week while I was watching cable news TV that refer to claims of election fraud by President Trump and some of his GOP cohorts. And I think these two quotes sum up exactly what I've been saying about Venus square Neptune and the upcoming square of Neptune to the nodes. The first is from Michael Steele, who's a former Republican National Committee chairman, and he said, "This stuff doesn't go away just because you don't want to look at it." And the second quote is from the Reverend Al Sharpton, who said the current situation vis-a-vis this election reminds him of the television show Fantasy Island. And he said, "Fantasy Island is over. The ship is leaving and headed back to shore. This is Reality Island now." So with that, I would like to introduce this week's guest and bring him on so we can talk some more. Now, where did I go with my bio? Here it is. Short and sweet. Michael's short and sweet bio. Michael Bartlett combines his 20-plus years of astrological learning and experience to focus on traditional and esoteric astrology, enhanced by skills he learned from the body-oriented core energetics process. In concert with his highly intuitive nature, Michael counsels clients using his extensively resourced toolbox, including 3 decades of business experience, to provide his clients with the best guidance possible. Based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Michael offers webinars, workshops, and classes through Kepler College and is available for readings, private experiential intensives, teaching, and speaking engagements. Michael's also the author of Astrological Mavericks, Do You Have What It Takes to Change the World? Available at your local bookstore, from Apple, and on Amazon Kindle. It's my pleasure now to welcome Michael back to the show. How are you today, Michael?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks for having me back on. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. A little frazzled. I don't know why. Maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it's Aquarius, Jupiter, Saturn. I don't know.
Do you think maybe Moon, Mars conjunct with Eris squaring Pluto, maybe?
Yeah. Maybe that's it.
Yo,
I'll tell
we
you
should
though,
fight about it. Let's arm wrestle across here.
yeah, right. Well, it's so funny because my son, who is an Aries son, he he's going with his girlfriend to see her parents for Christmas. Okay, it's not very far, and everybody's been isolated and whatever. So aside from that conversation, I wanted to say to him because he told me that his girlfriend's stepfather is very Republican. Let's just put it that way, you know. And so I thought, oh no, Mars is squaring Pluto. I better tell him not to engage in any serious arguments, you know, because it's like, you know, you don't want it to come to fisticuffs, as they would say.
Exactly.
And then I realized that the square was actually going to perfect before Christmas Eve, but I got word from him just the other night, yesterday, that his girlfriend's grandmother passed away,
Oh.
which I think is also, you know,
Yep.
these are the kinds of things that can happen, you know, when this energy is in the right place in somebody's chart. So, you know, I said, oh, okay, so I don't have to warn my son because I very much doubt anyone's going to be arguing right now, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, let me ask you about your take on Jupiter's entrance into Aquarius for the next year. And, you know, as separate from the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, in terms of how that particular energy might benefit us all on an individual level.
Definitely. Well, first of all, it's really good to remember that Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. So, you know, if you're depending on how old you are, you know, if you think about roughly 12 years ago, you know, kind of what you were experiencing back then might have a similar kind of flavor. You know, it's kind of like a reintroduction of, you know, the theme gets reintroduced, something maybe you'd forgotten about. Jupiter has a very interesting place of being seen as a benefic, but Jupiter is really just good at making anything that's there bigger. So if you're having issues or if you're not feeling well, like if you're having health issues or you're having problems with someone or you're ignoring something, I think my experience is that Jupiter has this way of expanding it so much so that you have to kind of deal with it. Some people say, oh, every time when you have a Jupiter transit, it means that things are going to be really going great. But wherever Aquarius is in your chart, you can expect there's going to be some expansion in the ways in which those Aquarian planets are going to be operating. Esoterically, Jupiter is the ruler of Aquarius. So in that sense, it's really nice that we have the traditional, even though we're not talking about the traditional one, which is Saturn, but we have the traditional and this esoteric rulers of Aquarius right now bound to one another. Also, Jupiter and Saturn are, you know, father and son. So that's a whole other interesting energetic dynamic to talk about there. But I think last year when I looked at this aspect, I really saw this as a breath of fresh air. You know, kind of like, you know, with all this heaviness we've been having with all the planets in Capricorn, you know, kind of like the ponderousness, the doom and gloom of it all. Aquarius, this sense of like taking a breath, walking up into whatever sort of periscope or tower or anything that gives us that perspective, right? And going up to the top of a mountain or climbing up at top of a tree or, you know, whatever it is that gives you that energetic sense of perspective over things. You know, that's what I like to think about Aquarius. It gives, we have to look at things, being able, when you get perspective, when you look at things from a larger sense, which is the other thing that Jupiter does, you know, I think of these two as kind of like a hot air balloon. You know, it blows up, so it lifts up. But what's really great is as one lifts up and away from things, everything kind of gets a different sort of patterning. We can see the ways in which things operate because we're not so personally involved with them. Aquarius doesn't really want it, but Aquarius doesn't want to get its hands dirty. It's kind of like how I think of it. it's like, it wants to think about it. It wants to take the dirty problems of life, the Saturn aspect, and then it wants to like come up with a great idea outside the box using Uranus and with Jupiter as an esoteric ruler. So it's, how do, like seeing that there's an issue with like how people are getting along right now, realizing that, we have a very divided country. And actually, to be honest, what's happening in the United States isn't very different from what's happening elsewhere in the world. There's a lot of divisiveness. There's a lot of, me versus you, us versus them sort of energy. And we have to find some way to remind ourselves and remind one another that we have far much more in common with one another that we don't. And I think that's going to be one of the gifts of Jupiter in Aquarius. I think some autocracy is going to happen. There's that, that part of Aquarius that can be very fixed and singular minded in its approach about things, and have like a kind of a very arrogant idea about the right things of doing things. I'm an Aquarian sun. I can completely claim guilt on those elements.
You know whereof you speak, eh?
Honey, I have wallowed in it for a long time.
I love it.
So it's, but I think that what I love, I'll never forget a few years ago, I was in San Francisco at a bookshop. I grew up in the Bay Area and I live in Santa Fe, but I got to go back there and I was in this bookshop, and I always love going into used bookshops and looking in the astrology section. And there was this great one on, the love signs. It was just this little book. It was for dating for people and everything. And of course I look right through to Aquarius, and I just loved it because this is such the Aquarian theme. It's like, you have to love Aquarius because Aquarius is going to tell you that they're an idiot or a moron or a pain in the butt or whatever right from the start. And so you have a hard time disliking an Aquarian because they're actually pretty honest about how they are. And so I think with that aspect of the truthfulness in Jupiter, I think, it's like, it's time for us as humans to admit our humanity, admit that we are simultaneously flawed animal creatures with souls trying to find our ways in a darkened universe, while also making these amazing connections on spiritual, emotional, and intellectual levels that are impacting ourselves, impacting each other, and making changes in the world. Look how much the world has changed in the last, 100 years.
You're so brilliant, Michael. That's why I love you. It's so funny. We think the same way, but we get there totally differently. Just what you just said. It's like I woke up this morning and I don't know what the heck was rolling through my mind. These like before you fall asleep and when you wake up, you're like, why am I thinking this or whatever? I don't even ask anymore, but I guess lately it's just been really, and I was thinking, oh gosh, I don't even remember exactly what the subject matter was, but it was probably, because I'm very into politics and stuff, as people can tell. I just all of a sudden felt like we're all just children. We're all children, and all of our actions and reactions are so governed not by this sort of high-minded stuff, but by our emotions, And I think what you just said, it makes me feel like, Aquarius to me is it's rational in part because it's objective. So I think that Jupiter might be able to increase our objectivity, which is exactly how I felt. It's like, oh, all of a sudden I became really objective about my own and other people's emotions, which is not easy to do when you're in the thick of the emotions, right? Especially like, say, around a Mars-Pluto square. Where it's like, that's mine. No, it's mine. No, it's mine. No, it's mine. So I love
the pain of the personal. We all, I think everyone's been carrying around a mask of being happy and cool and whatever, like from the 60s and the 70s for so long. And so many people are just really mad and angry and resentful and carrying so much and not talking about it. And it's like, we've got to find a way to talk about it. We've got to find a way to go like, the truth is, yeah, life sometimes is really crappy. Sometimes life is really painful. And we all go through that in our own particular way.
Right. Now Saturn's going to stay in Aquarius. Jupiter will only be there for a year, but Saturn's going to stay there until March of 2023. So how would you, enlighten people about the effects of that as Saturn journeys through Aquarius?
What I like about Saturn being there, first of all, being, what we call the traditional ruler, one of the original rulers, Saturn was the last planet we could see with the naked eye. It represents our skin, it represents our bone, our teeth, our boundaries. And I think with this, it's, coming from, these planets, both Jupiter and Saturn, have been soaking in the waters of Capricorn, which Saturn also rules, along with sibling and son Pluto, and they're making their way, so they're kind of like invested in like the family business, so to speak, and they're coming from the family business and they're coming out of it and they're going, wow, like, yeah, look at how much money we can make. Look how great we are. Look at like everyone's stock portfolios and everything now. But it's like, but then you like step out of your mansion, you step out of the boardroom, whatever, and you look out and you see that there is a sea of devastation. And you see that there is a sea of things that need to be done. Saturn's really great at going, hey, we can come up with business ideas on how to make this work right and make it beneficial for everyone. And so I think Saturn is like coming up and setting up these structures, setting up systems that actually are going to help socialize systems that can help people in the ways they're doing. We're already doing, with the government doing the stimulus checks and helping people. This is a type of socialization. But the truth is, we need to take care of one another. It just gets back to that over and over again. Like I'm not like no matter where I live, I don't want to live next to a family that doesn't have food or doesn't have the means to take care of themselves, because that means that they're going to be coming after. They're going to want to steal from me. I want everyone to feel like they have enough. I want everyone. It's funny. Mary Lynn and I on our show today, we were talking about the Danish idea. They talk about being the happiest country on the planet, but the key word is really more about contentment. The truth is what would it be like if people in the United States, it goes back to our idea, a chicken in every pot. What is it like to be content? Well, I think the chicken in every pot has gotten to the point where we have become so specialized in what it is that we believe we deserve, that we've forgotten that everyone deserves to simply have a chicken in their pot.
So do you think that either Saturn's journey through Aquarius itself or the Jupiter-Saturn cycle that kicked off on December 21st are really going to be, well, I should say that the results of their combination will be more beneficial on a humanitarian level? Or do you think that Saturn will present some resistance to that?
Well, I mean, Saturn is usually going to present some sort of a resistance, but the good news is that Saturn is in his home. He is happy in Aquarius. He's also just came out of his favorite other home, the home of Capricorn. So he's feeling very full of himself. And, I like to think that, when things are going really well, when we are content, when we're well fed, so to speak, if we have a well fed Saturn, that Saturn is going to come forth and realize, oh, it's nice to, I'm coming from a place of beneficence and I can actually make it better for other people. However, if that Saturn comes from a place of, that autocratic authoritarian, like I know better than you because because you're simply poor, or you're simply a person of color, or you're simply a woman, or whatever ways in which an individual denigrates another human being for their beingness and gets away with it, that is the flip side. Sorry, a gnat just flew into my mouth. How funny.
All right, it's not, but
So, so I think, there could be that other part of, the politician or the, we're seeing already some elements of it right now, in Aquarius. Sorry, I just flipped into another thing. The other thing we have to remember is that coming over from Taurus is Uranus, kind of disturbing the apple cart as well. So, I mean, I think there are a few forces in place right now where there's a sense of things that can kind of get a little out of control and people taking more control than they should. But then on the horizon, we're seeing things like Google being taken to court. And
I was just going to mention that because it seems like, Saturn's the judge, right? It's like the law coming after these social media platforms, which are obviously all technology driven, which is Aquarius, right?
Jupiter and Saturn both as justice and Aquarius as tech. Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
hello, what are we going to, and then, right on the heels of those two is going to be Pluto coming through going like, you damn well better have made the right rules and set things up properly, or otherwise I'm just going to level them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of us who are old enough to remember are wondering whether or not it will result the lawsuits that have been filed against Facebook and Google and whatever will result in a kind of breakup of AT&T, Ma Bell back in the 70s. And then what will be the result of that, So it'll be interesting to watch.
Well, it's interesting because what's been going on too is we're seeing, we're in the midst of it. We just had a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, and what has happened in the last, I ended up talking about this last year for the 2020 talk, is
Right.
each time you see Pluto and Jupiter get together, there's this huge power grab. And the interesting time with this is I didn't see each of the ones in previous periods. There have been those mergers, like the Time Warner merger and things like that, like these mergers of like, wait a minute, I thought there were laws against monopolies, and so here we are where, basically all those protections have been pulled out that made the crash of 29 possible, that were put in to help make sure that it wouldn't happen again, have all been removed again.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So it'll be interesting thing. Yeah.
And then with
Yeah.
Uranus coming over there from Taurus, it's asking for like some sort of a new frame. But so you're asking like as far as like a hardship because of Saturn. Well, I mean, I think with that and the hardship of the square from Uranus, it's a hardship, and yet I think it's a hardship that is aligned with attaining the goal of Aquarianism. Does that make
Well, you're
sense?
talking. Yeah, but let me just clarify for those who are listening, because number one, I just wanted to make clear that Michael uses Aquarius, Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius. Some of us do, and some of us use Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius. So whether one, he's talking from that perspective. And the other thing is you flipped ahead to talk about next year, we're going to have 3 squares. So now that Saturn's moved into Aquarius, he's also going to move forward. I think the first one is in February, and then the next one, I don't remember if it's June, and then December, late December, I think, next year. So there'll be 3 squares by Saturn to Uranus, which is, but to some of us, the ruler of Aquarius, the modern ruler of Aquarius, right? So my experience has been that, Saturn in Aquarius or Saturn in frictional aspect to what I consider to be the ruler of Aquarius, Uranus, is a very rebellious energy. And what we saw when Saturn first moved into Aquarius during the spring this year was all of the riots and the protests, the George Floyd murder, and police defunding movement and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that the friction between the two of them, and what you were talking about too, is Saturn is Kronos, and Uranus is actually his father, right? Whereas Saturn's the father and Jupiter's the son. Right?
Well, we have 3 generations, right, in that relationship.
Right. So we have a lot of father-son and a lot of patriarchal themes running through these cycles, in addition to the Saturn-Pluto, because Saturn was also Pluto's, he's a Titan, not a god. So Uranus and Gaia gave birth to the Titans, of which Saturn was one, and then Saturn gives birth to the gods and goddesses of the Olympic pantheon, right? So technically, there's a lineage here that passes along. One of the things I just wrote about is the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is the king is dead, long live the king, because Saturn's the old king who gets overthrown by Jupiter. But originally, Uranus was the old king who got overthrown by Saturn. You see, yeah. So there's a lot of rebelliousness just inherent in a lot of these energies here, depending on how one wants to look at them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think the question is whether or what will be the rebelliousness, or if you agree that there will be. I'm not sure,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I tend to, what I realize that a lot of times I tend to look at a little bit more of the brighter side, but I mean, what we can see, I mean, what you stated it perfectly when Aquarius first dipped into, I mean, when Saturn first dipped into Aquarius, what we started seeing were these, the riots and the question of like, what is right human relationship? A knee on a neck is not right human relationship. People of a certain color being shot in the back 90, at some ridiculous rate is not right human relationship. That means that our quote peace officers end quote are not really keeping the peace. This is not very Aquarian. So I think I think it's going to be this harmonizing and balancing. On top of that, we have three Mercury retrograde periods that happen in each of the air signs.
Right. The shift.
I think,
yeah.
Yep. So I just think there's just over and over again this thing about reworking, the programming that's happened to society, that 50% of the population believes that, Democrats are basically going to come in and steal their children in the middle of the night and sell them on the black slave market. I mean, on
Right.
sex slave
Black
market. I mean,
market. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just like I don't I don't understand it. It's it's because of how we allow social media to work. It's the things that I'm hearing left and right about these things. These advertisements go on. Well, Facebook doesn't care if Russia's paying for, they're buying advertising. What do they care about what it is that they're advertising?
Yeah,
There has to be
exactly.
quality.
Right. Well,
Cyber.
Saturn is what was I going to say? Saturn is restriction and Aquarius is technology. So it's kind of like, the restriction, as we said before, it's the social media platforms or Google, other technological sites that have only come about with the internet are prone to be re-regulated. And that'd be an interesting thing too, because you gave voice to you did all of the regulations that were stripped away, that were put in place in 29. They were stripped away. We had 2008, 2009. Some of them were put partially back in place, and then those have been watered down. So I wonder if Saturn squares to Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius and Saturn squares to Uranus will be finding new foundations in regulation for different groups, many of which are, technology oriented. And what exactly that means, we have yet to see,
And it's also, it's Taurus, it's Uranus and Taurus, which is new forms of things. So, AI and the cars that are driving by themselves and robots, and I mean, it's a very interesting time we're stepping into, and it makes a lot of sense that there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of different stories going on because we're all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Story of our lives, right?
Well,
let me check. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say what I realize. The thing is that I think is really important, at least for the years that I've understood with Uranus and Saturn with Aquarius, is that the benefit of what Saturn gives is if the appropriate things are done with Saturn, there's a perfect foundation that is built that supports anything. And I think especially when it comes to the Aquarian model, if the foundation is built appropriately, if the appropriate steps are taken, if the time and energy and efforts are all towards the right thing, then that Uranian insight can come in. And it's just like lightning touching the ground and transforming it into something new. We usually think of Pluto as a transformer in a way, but Uranus also has that transformational aspect of whatever it touches in the moment is forever changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just made me flash on looking at it like Aquarius energy or Uranus to me rules the 11th house, right? And that's the house of the legislature in mundane astrology. And Saturn being regulation, it's kind of, and foundations. Like it just occurred to me that all this talk about the GOP imploding and, not being the same party it used to be, it was the party of Lincoln and yada, yada, and whether or not it's going to split, right? And Saturn being foundations, Aquarius being new, outside the box, forward thinking, humanitarian, that maybe the squares this year are actually going to in some way be reflected through our politics with the either foundation of a new party or the splitting of an old party into two. It'll be an interesting thing to see.
Right, because as you know, that Saturn and blah, 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 the Saturn is making a third quarter square to Uranus. So this is, it's coming up to a completion. This has already been going on. So this is the crisis in consciousness. This is when something has to break through that surpasses that which created the tension in the first place.
A resolution. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say? I just want to ask you real quick about the Cancer full moon coming up next week. Is there anything you wanted to share your thoughts on that?
I think it'll be really good. For those of us who are fairly introverts and, creative, quiet types, this time has been very helpful and enjoyable. And I think, when that Cancer moon comes along, it's really, about being home and being quiet. And so many people I know are being challenged in having to be home and not be with family members. And there are a lot of people who are taking the chance and being out there. But I would just really encourage people to be home and take care of themselves and take care of, what, our own environment is just so crucial and so important. And I think as we move into this next year, it's kind of like it gives us an opportunity to kind of come back into contact with ourselves and see what's important so that we can kind of make our own hearth for the year, so to speak.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think a lot of us, the more, I'm not going to say it as simply as saying those who are extroverts or more social or whatever don't spend time thinking about their internal self. But this year, if we're going to find any light at the end of the tunnel or any silver lining in the clouds of it, would be that it's given us the opportunity to be more introspective, and also to stop, right? Also, this heavy duty Capricorn energy, Capricorn's like, halt, who goes there? Stop. You need to sit still for a little while. And maybe you'll, take the time, or being given the time as a gift, actually, as opposed to a nightmare. If people can change their perspective about that, especially now as Saturn goes through Aquarius, right? The shift from being myopic and looking at the glass half empty to, with his conjunction to Jupiter, looking at it as half full. So we see both sides of the equation. Something that you said before also made me think, and I've used this example before. If you take something, anything, a belonging of yours, your phone, your glass, your book, whatever, hold it up in your hand and look at it. And if you've always looked at it straight on, take it and turn it and see, I use the example of a prism, right? Turn it and see how the light hits it differently. It gives you a different visual, and that allows your mind to expand because you're seeing something, the same old thing. You do it with people, right? All the time. We take them for granted, which I think a lot of partnership reevaluation has gone on during this past year. So seeing someone from a different perspective or in a different light can make all the difference in terms of how we relate to each other. So, and some of that I think has to do with what you were saying also about, not being able to have a neighbor who can't feed themselves. Some of us would say what you did, because you'd be afraid that they would come and try to steal your stuff. And others would say it just breaks our heart. I can't see someone suffer, and anything in between. So, exactly. Anyway, listen, I want to give you enough time to be able to tell us what you're up to now. I know you've got something coming up very shortly this weekend, I think. I know that you're on a regular podcast of your own. And you've got, this book out, which has been out for a while, but tell us how people can find you, what you're up to, how they can follow you, sign up for, your seminars and lectures and all that good stuff.
Yay, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, my friend Marilyn LeBlanc, who's an astrologer here in Santa Fe, she has been doing a show called Moonwise for a long time for a radio show here in town. And she and I have started doing a weekly talk called Deep Dives with New Perspectives on YouTube. So you can just look up either my name or her name or Deep Dives with New Perspectives, and they'll show you we have a few good podcasts about what's going on. We're both Aquarian suns with Scorpio moons, so we've kind of our own little unique way of looking at things. Oh my
God. You must have some club going on. That's great.
Kind of do.
I love it.
And then this Saturday, she and I and Aaron Sullivan and astrologer Daniel Fiverson are all four going to be giving a talk at 12 noon Mountain Time here in Santa Fe on Zoom. Talking about 2021, the gates of hell are open. We're each going to spend about a half an hour talking about some of the elements that we see going on in the year next year, and then will be a half an hour Q&A time. You can go to brownpapertickets.com, and in the search thing, you can either put in 2021 or any of our names, or the gates of hell are open, and it'll come up, and the ticket's $15. But that'll be really good, and you can get that as a recording afterwards and listen to it as often as you want. And then I also teach part-time at Kepler College. I have a class on esoteric astrology, a final class coming up, a workshop in January that I'm doing. You can go to keplercollege.org to see about that. Otherwise, my website is core, C-O-R-E, Michael.com. My local phone number is 505-690-3860. Love doing readings and speaking engagements, and also have my book, Astrological Mavericks. If you have a planet conjunct an angle in your chart, you are a maverick, and the book covers a lot of really wonderful examples. Sherry and I talked about it. You could probably look. You have a whole area where you keep a lot of your where your stories, your shows are archived, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So people can just go in there and do a search.
Yes. I think the last time you were on the show was April 9th. So people can go and look back to that. And then I know you were on, I don't remember, but it was the beginning of the year or the end of last year.
It's on July 27th, I think, or July 26th, I think. July 25th was the last time. And then I think it was on a time before that.
Okay, I must missed that. Sometimes I mislabel my file.
But I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa and Happy Hanukkah, and finding ways to find the compassion within ourselves and the ability to connect with one another, and realizing that we're all humans, and we're going to do a lot better if we can help one another towards making it out of this craziness that's been created in our world, if we create a vision together.
Oh, I love that, Michael. I want to highly recommend the talk that you are giving on, is it Sunday? Was it the 26th?
Saturday, 26th.
Saturday, the 26th. Is you, Daniel Fiverson, I'm sorry, Aaron Sullivan, and
Marilyn Block.
Okay. Highly recommend all of them. I don't know Marilyn that well, but the other three I know very well. So I highly, highly recommend it. And I hope that people will go to brownpaperbag.com and, give Michael a shout if you want to get a reading from him. He's fabulous. And I always enjoy talking to you, Michael. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a treat. Thank you so much, Sherry. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone else for joining us. I hope you've all found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on December 31st for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, star.